It was meant to be just a regular night out. But when Sara, my wife, chose bar hopping and flirting over staying home with me, I realized I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. What came next was a choice that tore our lives apart. Her job, her name, and the marriage we built, it all went up in smoke. I didn't interfere. I let her choices run their course. Because sometimes, the only way someone learns how serious their actions are is by paying the price themselves. But before we jump into this wild ride of betrayal, heartbreak, and, yeah, maybe a little redemption, drop a comment below and tell me where you're tuning in from. And hey, if this story hooks you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and tap the bell so you don't miss the next chapter. Sara was 33, living right in the heart of San Francisco, a city as fast-paced and flashy as she was. On paper, she had it all: a top-level job as a senior marketing exec, a sleek high-rise apartment with a killer view of the bay, and a crew of friends who thought she was living the dream. But underneath that picture-perfect surface, Sara was dealing with a hollow feeling she couldn't shake. No promotion or pay raise could fill the growing void in her personal life, especially when it came to her marriage to me, Luke. I'd been her husband for 8 years. The steady one. The guy she could count on. But over time, she started to drift. Late nights at work, constant travel, never-ending parties and networking events, those became her escape routes. The small things stopped mattering to her. She didn't see the way I looked at her anymore, or how I still tried to make dinner feel like home. Our laughter had faded into silence, and what was left of our marriage felt like we were just going through the motions. Sara was slowly shutting out the one person who still showed up for her, day after day. Then came that Thursday. It was a hectic afternoon, and Sara was stirring her third coffee in the sterile little office kitchen. The flickering fluorescent lights buzzed softly, casting everything in a pale, cold glow. Her coworker Jenna was there too, leaning against the counter with a smirk that said she was up to something. "Come on, Sara. Just one drink," Jenna teased. "It's Thursday, basically the weekend already." Sara hesitated, lightly drumming her fingers on her mug. The idea sounded good. It had been a while since she let loose without thinking about deadlines or home life. She glanced down at her phone. She knew I'd be waiting, probably even had dinner ready. The guilt started crawling up her spine. "I don't know, Jenna," she mumbled. "Luke won't be thrilled if I stay out tonight." Her voice cracked a little, the guilt showing through. Jenna just rolled her eyes and waved it off. "Oh, please. He'll live. It's just one drink. You've been grinding nonstop. You need to relax." Sara looked out the window at the city pulsing below, the lights, the buzz, the promise of something different. Her sense of responsibility pulled at her, but it was getting drowned out by how tired she felt inside. Tired of being perfect. Tired of pretending. With a sigh, she put her cup down and gave in. "Okay, just one drink. That's it," she said, forcing a smile she didn't really feel. As she followed Jenna out the door, her mind was already spinning with thoughts of what the night might bring. She had no clue that this would be the moment where everything started to unravel. Sara kept pace with Jenna as they left the building, her head buzzing with doubt and desire. She had promised me she'd try harder, get home earlier, be more present, rebuild what we'd lost. But tonight, she felt a different pull. She was worn down. Sick of being the dependable wife, the overachiever, the woman who checked every box but still felt like something was missing. As the cool night air hit her face and the neon glow lit up the street ahead, Sara let the thought settle in. For once, she was chasing her own freedom. The city always seemed like a way out, a break from the weight of being someone's wife, from always having to live up to something. She pictured the busy sidewalks, the laughter echoing out of every bar, the sense of community she felt she'd been missing for years. It had been forever since she let herself feel that rush, that sense of freedom that came with being untethered. "Just one drink," she murmured to herself, as if hearing it aloud would make the choice easier to swallow. Truth was, she couldn't resist. She craved that spark again, the excitement of living in the moment with no strings attached. And really, what harm could come from one night of letting go? It felt like a tiny rebellion against the dull rhythm her life had fallen into. Jenna led the way into a place called the Ola Lola, and the moment they walked in, Sara was hit by the noise, the energy. It wrapped around her fast. She took a long breath in, feeling her chest loosen a little. Tonight, she told herself, she was just going to let go. Just tonight. The second they stepped inside, the shift was immediate. Compared to the outside world, the bar was like another dimension. Low lighting, voices blending into music, and the beat pulsing through the air, it all wrapped around her like a second skin. It felt like entering a place where none of her troubles could follow. Here, She wasn't someone's wife or an overworked exec. She was just Sara. The noise was actually comforting, drowning out the silence she'd been living in at home. The place had this electric buzz, and it felt like the whole night was opening its arms to her. Jenna found them a high top near the bar and leaned close, eyes scanning the scene. "You've still got it, Sara," she said with a grin. "Half the guys in here can't stop staring at you." Sara caught a glimpse of a few lingering glances and let a sly smile play on her lips. It had been a while since she felt this confident, this seen. "What can I say?" she teased. "Some of us are just built different." Her voice was light, playful, like a younger version of herself had come back for the night. The drink started to hit, loosening the tension in her shoulders, and the conversation flowed like they didn't have a care in the world. For the first time in what felt like ages, she wasn't trapped by the life waiting back home. She felt untethered. The music pounded through the floor, up her spine, and for a few hours, Sara felt more alive than she had in weeks. The night kept rolling, music, drinks, laughter, and then something shifted. That's when Sara noticed him, a tall guy standing over by the bar. He had this easy confidence about him, like the room didn't own him, he owned the room. His smile was relaxed, and he scanned the crowd like he was enjoying every second of it. And when their eyes met, something changed. His whole expression softened, like she was the only one he noticed. There was a spark there, one Sara couldn't pretend she didn't feel. Jenna, always quick to pick up on a vibe, gave Sara a nudge and grinned. "Looks like someone's into you," she whispered, tilting her head toward the guy. Sara felt her heart skip, but she tried to play it cool. "It's harmless," she said softly. "Just a little fun." Her voice was light, but inside she couldn't deny how good it felt to be noticed. The attention, the energy, it pulled her in. Then, right on cue, the guy made his move. He weaved through the crowd and stopped at their table with a warm, relaxed smile. "Hey," he said casually. "I'm Paul. What brings you here tonight?" Sara leaned back, playful spark in her eyes. "Just out for a little fun. Same as everyone else," she replied, surprised at how easy the words came. Jenna raised an eyebrow and shot her a wink. "Still got it, huh?" Sara laughed, finally letting go of the tension. "Yes, so," she said, shrugging like it was no big deal, but the look in her eyes said otherwise. From there, the conversation took off. Sara and Paul traded banter back and forth like they'd known each other for years. He wasn't asking about her responsibilities or why she looked tired. He was just talking to her. And that alone felt like a breath of fresh air. They talked about everything and nothing, favorite hangout spots, music they loved, places they wanted to visit. Nothing deep, nothing heavy. Just easy, carefree chatter. As the night wore on, the music slowed down, settling into a more intimate rhythm. And that's when Sara noticed something else. She was actually enjoying this. Not just the drinks or the music, but the conversation, the connection. She wasn't thinking about home. She wasn't thinking about me. She was just there. The space between them started to close as their playful banter gave way to something a little deeper. For the first time in what felt like forever, Sara felt a flicker of something real, something simple and easy. It wasn't forced. It wasn't complicated. It was just connection. And it had been a long damn time since she'd felt that. After what seemed like hours, Paul leaned in just a little, his voice dropping low. "I'd love to take you out sometime," he said with a grin. "Can I get your number?" Sara paused for a second. There was a brief flicker of guilt in the back of her mind, like a warning bell going off. But the rush of the night, the buzz of attention, the flirtation, the way the music made everything feel weightless, pulled harder. With a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, she grabbed her phone. "Sure," she said lightly, "but it doesn't mean anything." She tried to sound breezy, like it was no big deal, even though a small ache crept into her chest. Paul just chuckled, clearly not bothered. "I'll call you," he said, flashing that easy smile again. Sara nodded, her pulse quickening as she slipped her phone back into her purse. The night still had life left in it, and she wasn't ready to let it go, not yet. Still, beneath all that excitement, something was starting to slip, and part of her knew it. The evening kept rolling forward, loud music, flirty glances, the kind of fun that made her forget. It was the kind of night she used to crave. No pressure. No responsibilities. No one asking her why she wasn't home. Just freedom, plain and simple. But as things started to wind down, she finally pulled out her phone. The screen lit up. It was late, later than she'd planned. And just like that, the thought of me, Luke, popped into her head, gnawing at her conscience. She scrolled through her messages. Nothing. No missed calls. No worried texts. Just silence. And it was that silence that hit the hardest. because even in my quiet, she could feel the weight of what she'd chosen. She stood there, staring at the screen, imagining me sitting at home in the stillness, probably trying to convince myself not to give up. That familiar guilt crawled back up her spine. But she shoved it down again. It's just one night, she told herself. Nothing serious. I'd be fine. She leaned against the counter, repeating the lie in her head like it could somehow erase the truth. She hadn't crossed a line, right? She wasn't doing anything wrong. She was just having fun. Something she deserved after everything. A little space, a little freedom. It didn't mean everything was falling apart. So with a shake of her head, Sara tucked the phone back into her bag. The music thumped around her. The voices, the laughter, it all pulled her back into the moment. And just like that, she let herself fall back into the night. Whatever came next, she didn't want to think about it. But when Sara finally made it home, something felt off. The porch light, that soft glow I always left on for her, was out. She stood there in the dark for a second, heart picking up speed. I'd never forgotten to leave that light on before. Something was different. The house, once warm and familiar, felt cold now, like the soul had been sucked out of it. She opened the door slowly, half expecting to hear the hum of the fridge or the TV murmuring in the background. But it was dead silent. Too silent. She called my name. Nothing. Just more silence pressing in around her. Each step down the hallway echoed with a kind of finality. When she reached the kitchen, her eyes landed on something that made her chest tighten. A neat stack of papers sat on the counter. Right next to it, a small velvet box. And her breath caught. She knew that box. She didn't even have to open it. It was the one I used when I asked her to marry me. The one that once held the ring she now barely noticed. Her hand shook as she picked up the letter beside it. Dread settled over her like a heavy coat. She unfolded the paper slowly, heart pounding in her ears. And then she read it. Sara, I can't keep living like this. For years, I've waited, hoping you'd finally pick me instead of the chaos. The bars. The strangers. Every time you said you'd change, I believed you. But love doesn't work without trust, without respect, without commitment. And you've given me none of those. I know about the flirting, the late-night bar hopping. The phone numbers slipped across cocktail napkins. I kept my mouth shut for a long time, gave you the benefit of the doubt more times than I can count, but I'm done waiting. If there's still anything left to fight for, be at the Holiday Inn Express and Suites, room 206, this Friday, by 5 p.m. If you're not there, then I'll know your silence is your answer. The divorce papers are ready. I hope you read them carefully. Luke. The words on the page swam before her eyes, the edges of her vision blurring as shock took over. Her chest tightened. She read it again, hoping something had changed, that maybe she'd misunderstood. But no, the message was loud and clear. She'd gone too far. She'd treated his patience like it had no limit. All the promises she'd made, empty. The excuses, the lies she'd told herself to justify it all, they'd finally caught up with her. Her eyes shifted to the stack of papers on the counter. She didn't need to open them to know what they were. She reached out but stopped short, her hand frozen, hovering above the top sheet like touching it might make it all real. There was a weight in the air, heavy with finality, and she could feel it settling in her chest. Everything was unraveling, and there was no one left to blame but herself. The silence in the house was deafening. All the noise of her life, bars, crowds, meaningless conversation, none of it could drown out the quiet that surrounded her now. Deep down, Sara knew, he was serious this time. There was no coming back from this if she didn't act. And yet, she stood still, frozen, facing the very consequence she'd never believed would arrive. The next morning, she sat in a daze, barely able to process the letter she'd read the night before. It clung to her, heavy and sharp, but she refused to let it sink in. She crushed the note in her hand, balling it tightly as if that would take away the sting. To her, it didn't feel like goodbye. It felt like a scare tactic. He's bluffing, she muttered, trying to convince herself more than anything. Luke isn't like that. He'll come back. He always comes back. She kept repeating it, clinging to the version of him who forgave too easily, who always gave her another chance. He wouldn't just let go. That wasn't him. Determined to avoid the growing weight in her chest, Sara shoved the whole situation out of her mind. She busied herself with work. Let the hours blur together. By the time the sun dipped, she was back at the Ola Lola with Jenna and a few others, like nothing had happened. The moment she walked in, she slipped back into her escape. The music, the chatter, the drinks. All of it dulled the voice in her head that kept whispering, "You've gone too far this time." She took a slow sip of her drink, scanning the bar with narrowed eyes. "Really, Luke? This is how you fix things," she muttered bitterly. She could still hear his words from the letter echoing in her mind, but she pushed them away. No room for guilt here. Not tonight. Instead, she leaned back, letting herself melt into the atmosphere. The flirtation, the attention, it was a bomb. "He'll come back," she told herself again. "He always does." The night went on, and Sara kept pretending. But no matter how loud the bar got, the truth wasn't going anywhere. She could ignore it, sure, but it wasn't disappearing. As the days ticked by, Sara's stubbornness began to wear thin. Still, she told herself it was all temporary. That Luke was angry, not serious. That he'd calm down and come home. She clung to that fantasy like it was a lifeline. She filled her schedule with work, friends, drinks, anything to keep from being alone with her thoughts. The Ola Lola became her hideout. It was where she could fake control, drown the guilt, and pretend everything was still okay. But no matter how many nights she spent pretending, that unease kept growing. Quiet, steady, relentless. One evening, after yet another late return, Sara stepped into her apartment and felt something was off. The air felt colder. The silence, heavier. She paused, scanning the space that suddenly felt too empty. Then she saw it. Another letter. It was sitting on the kitchen counter, plain and unassuming, just like the last one. Her purse hit the table with a soft thud as her breath caught. She didn't need to open it to know who it was from. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up, her heart already bracing for what was inside. She recognized the handwriting instantly. Luke's. It used to bring her comfort. Now it felt like a punch to the chest. Without thinking, she ripped the envelope open, part of her not wanting to know, but knowing she had no choice anymore. As she read, the words hit her like a sledgehammer, sharp, emotionless, final. "Sara, you didn't show. I waited until 5:30. Let this be clear. I'm not coming back. The account is closed. The papers are filed. I left the house key under the mat for the realtor. It'll be listed next week. This is goodbye. Luke." Sara felt her breath hitch, her chest growing tight as the finality of those words sank in. She'd missed her shot. There were no second chances this time. And just like that, the reality of life without Luke settled deep in her gut. She was alone. The next morning, her phone buzzed, slicing through the heavy silence in the apartment. She picked it up, staring at the unfamiliar number on the screen. Maybe it was a distraction. Maybe something unrelated. Anything but this mess. "Hello," she answered, her voice barely steady. "Is this Sara Reed?" Came a woman's voice, calm, professional, and cold. "This is Linda Caldwell from Murphy Law Firm. I'm calling to confirm that your husband, Mr. Luke Reed, has officially filed for divorce. We'll begin processing the documents shortly." Sara's heart skipped a beat. "Divorce?" she repeated, like she hadn't heard it right. The word sounded foreign, like it belonged to someone else's life. She fumbled for words, trying to keep up with the conversation, but the call was already ending. She sat there in stunned silence, phone still in hand. This wasn't a fight. It wasn't just some harsh letter or a timeout. Luke was gone. He wasn't bluffing. He had moved on. Her hands started to shake as she walked over to the computer. She had to check, anything to feel like she still had a grip on something. She logged into their joint bank account, praying for reassurance. But her stomach twisted when the screen loaded. The account was frozen. Panic clawed at her chest. She quickly tried her personal account and felt another wave of dread crash over her. Almost empty. Sara sat frozen, unable to believe what she was seeing. She'd never imagined Luke would actually go through with it. But he had. And he'd been planning it. Every move. Every detail. The more she thought about it, the more it overwhelmed her. He hadn't just reacted. He'd been preparing while she'd been spiraling. And now, she was left to face the full weight of everything she'd done. As the divorce proceedings began, Sara's world started crumbling piece by piece. In court, Luke's lawyer, Thomas Murphy, stood calm and collected, laying out the case like he'd rehearsed it for months. He laid everything bare. The years of neglect, the broken vows, the selfish choices. Each point clear, sharp, and impossible to argue. Sara sat stiff in her seat, stunned by the calm precision in Thomas's voice. Every sentence felt like a blow to her already shaken pride. "Your Honor," Thomas began, his tone flat and firm. Mr. Reed took all the appropriate steps to protect his financial well-being after enduring years of disregard for his marriage. He held up folders, one after another. "Here is a detailed ledger of Ms. Reed's spending habits, along with legal documentation of asset reallocations and He paused for effect. "Screenshots. Texts, emails, photographs, all confirming her extramarital relationship. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. There it was, laid out in black and white. Evidence of the life she'd tried to compartmentalize. The affair with Jaden Rivera, what she'd always told herself was a one-time mistake, was now official proof of betrayal. She'd thought it was behind her. Clearly, Luke hadn't. The days dragged on, and things only got worse. Her career, the one thing she'd always relied on, started to crack. Word had gotten out. Whispers followed her in the hallways. The Sara who once walked confidently into meetings now shrunk under the weight of judgmental stares. The gossip spread fast. Her secrets weren't secrets anymore. Then came the meeting she'd been dreading. One afternoon, her boss called her into the office. She forced a tight smile, already knowing what was coming. She stepped inside, heart thudding in her chest. "Sara," her boss began. His tone was calm, but there was no mistaking the firmness behind it. "You've been a valuable part of this team for a long time, Sara," he said. "But it's obvious your personal life is starting to affect your work." He paused, just long enough to let it land. "I think it might be best for everyone if you take some time to step back and focus on putting things back in order." Sara didn't argue. Her heart sank. The pressure of everything she'd done, the choices she couldn't take back, hit her all at once. She gave a silent nod, the resignation settling in her bones. Her reputation, once something she guarded so carefully, was now nothing more than a wreck. There was nothing left to defend. And as she walked out of that office, probably for the last time, it finally sunk in just how far she had fallen. The life she once lived, filled with goals, comfort, and confidence, was now gone. What remained was a hollow shell. The fallout was bigger than she ever imagined. With each passing day, she began to feel just how much she had lost. Sara, the woman who once had it all, was now left sifting through the debris of what used to be her future. Her new apartment, a tiny one-bedroom tucked in a rundown part of town, was a daily reminder of how far things had fallen. It was small, quiet, and cold. None of the warmth she once shared with Luke existed here. No familiar laughter, no dinner conversations. Just silence. Just her. What she used to call freedom now felt more like a cage. Every night, she'd lie in bed with the weight of it all pressing down on her chest, choices, regrets, and everything in between. Trying to outrun the emptiness, Sara started dating again. She met a few guys, some polite, some charming, some that looked good on paper. But none of them stuck. None of them made her feel anything close to what she used to have. They smiled, they flirted, but it all felt fake. Shallow. The connection she wanted just wasn't there. The truth hit her hard. What she had with Luke wasn't replaceable. She traded something rare and deep for a handful of fleeting moments, and there was no way to get it back. Even the Ola Lola, the place that once felt like an escape, lost its shine. The nights out started feeling more like chores than fun. The energy that used to light her up now felt like noise. Empty noise. She'd sit at the bar, glass in hand, staring at the people around her, pretending she was still part of it all. But the truth was, the noise couldn't drown out the silence inside her anymore. Eventually, Sara had to face what she'd been avoiding. She had lost the only man who truly loved her. The life she once took for granted was gone, and no amount of flings or fun could undo the damage she'd caused. She was alone now. And that truth? That truth was finally too heavy to ignore. The months crawled by, and slowly, piece by piece, Sara started to rebuild. It wasn't easy. Her past still followed her like a shadow. But she knew she couldn't stay broken forever. She got a job at a small boutique, a far cry from the corner office she once owned. It wasn't glamorous, but the long hours gave her something she hadn't felt in a long time: purpose. Folding clothes, helping customers, sweeping up at closing time, it gave her a rhythm, a kind of peace. A place to be. Something steady. And finally, she took a step she'd been avoiding for years. She started seeing a therapist. At first, therapy felt strange, like reopening a wound that had never really healed. She'd sit there, unsure of what to say, unsure of how deep she wanted to dig. But week by week, something started to shift. She began to see herself more clearly. The reasons behind her choices, the damage she caused, and the forgiveness she desperately needed to give herself, they all started to make sense. It wasn't easy. It hurt like hell. But it was the kind of pain that brought growth. Alongside those sessions, Sara found herself reconnecting with pieces of her old life, parts she hadn't touched in years. She picked up a paintbrush again, letting colors spill across the canvas as a way to express everything she'd locked inside for too long. The trail she used to hike, paths she once loved, called her back. Out there, away from the noise, surrounded by nothing but trees and sky, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Those quiet moments reminded her of the woman she used to be before the chaos, before the choices that tore everything apart. One afternoon, as she wandered through a park not far from her apartment, the crisp autumn air filled her lungs. The sun dipped low, bathing the path ahead in gold. And for the first time in months, Sara felt something settle inside her. She didn't have all the answers, and her life wasn't what she once pictured, but she was okay with that. She had stopped fighting the past. She had accepted it. As she paused, looking out at the sunlit path, a small smile tugged at her lips. This isn't the end of my story, she thought. It's the start of something new. She didn't know what was coming next, but she was finally ready to meet it head-on with intention. The road she was walking wouldn't be smooth. It wasn't supposed to be. Healing took time, and hers had been anything but quick. But every step, no matter how small, was progress. Each day, she got closer to the woman she was meant to become. That old confidence was still there buried, maybe, but it had changed. Now it came from a deeper place. It wasn't about impressing anyone or chasing excitement. It was about knowing who she was, flaws and all, and learning to stand in that truth. In the months since the divorce, Sara had learned something she never understood before. Real love wasn't about fire and impulse. It was about trust, respect, commitment. She had broken those things with Luke. But in doing so, she gained the clarity to finally understand what they meant. Yes, she missed the life they had. There were days she still thought about it. But she knew that in order to move forward, she had to let go. Truly let go. She no longer saw her past as a chain around her ankles. It had become the groundwork for who she was becoming. Her mistakes didn't define her, but they had taught her. She had learned to forgive herself, to see the pain not as punishment, but as part of the process. Standing at the edge of a new beginning, Sara understood one thing with absolute clarity. The road ahead wouldn't be perfect. There would be hard days. There would be memories that tried to drag her backward. But she wasn't that lost woman anymore. Not the one who ran from truth. Not the one who relied on distraction to feel whole. This time, she was walking with purpose. And no matter what the future held, she was ready to meet it. One step at a time.